Today we're going to wrap up our emergency fund series. By the end of this video, you will know the following 3 things. 1, the type of account you should keep your emergency fund in. 2, the 3 steps you should follow to choose the right bank to open your account with. And 3, the most common mistakes you should avoid when it comes to your emergency savings. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Jennifer from NestEgg. At NestEgg, we teach and coach millennials and Gen Zers on everything money related, from saving and paying off debt to investing and building a retirement nest egg. We have a new video every Sunday, so hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell, and you'll be the first to know whenever we post our latest and greatest money saving, investing, and retirement advice. So let's get started. We all know how important an emergency fund is. It protects us from the financial curveballs that life throws at us, such as when we get into an accident, have to unexpectedly repair our car or our home, or when we lose our job in the midst of a global pandemic. It also helps us break this dependency on credit cards and borrowing, saving us from the exorbitant interest rates and fees, because we can dip into our emergency fund when a surprise expense pops up. The last thing we need in an emergency situation is the added worry and anxiety of getting into more debt, which will cost us even more money in the long run. I'd love to know if you have an emergency fund. And if you do, where do you keep your emergency savings? Drop us a comment below and let us know. The first question we'll tackle is where to keep your emergency fund savings. Our recommendation is to always keep it in a separate high-yield savings account than the rest of your money. A high-yield savings account is one that pays a higher interest rate than the more established traditional banks. Most of these established traditional banks pay little to no interest on your savings account. I know high-yield savings accounts are also paying close to nothing at the moment compared to earlier this year and last year, but you know what? Close to nothing is still 20 times better than the nearly nothing that the bigger mainstream banks are paying right now. The vast majority of high-yield savings accounts are online only or with banks that have very few physical branches. That's how they can keep their running or operational costs low, how they can save themselves some money, and how they can transfer these savings, pass these savings onto you in the form of a slightly higher interest rate on your savings account. You can go to bankrate.com or investopedia.com to find the best high-yield savings accounts currently. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the best high-yield savings accounts as of this taping, according to both of these websites. And you can see that even though this information was pulled minutes apart from each other, the banks are not the same on both lists. Why? Because the banks change their rates regularly based on how the market is doing and what their competitors are doing. They also move their interest rates around as a carrot to attract new customers. So don't be surprised if you go back from one week to the next and see a completely different list of banks on these 2 sites. I've included the links in the description below. Given that interest rates on high-yield savings accounts fluctuate so much, this leads us to the second question, which is how do you figure out which bank to go with? Here's how. First and foremost, choose a bank that is convenient for you. This is the most important thing about your emergency savings, that you keep your money in a place where you can quickly withdraw it when you need it, where you don't have to jump through hoops and fire, because that's the last thing you really want to be doing in an emergency situation, trying to figure out how to withdraw your cash from somewhere. Second, don't go interest rate chasing. As I've already mentioned, the interest rate on high-yield savings accounts can change often depending on economic and market conditions. So the bank that has the best rate today or this week may not have the best rate tomorrow or next week. As long as you are getting more than the 0.05%, which is the national average for savings accounts at the time of this taping, you're good to go. Also, the difference in interest rates on most high-yield savings accounts is often so minimal, it's not worth the hassle of going to a lesser-known bank that's simply not as convenient for you. So let's take, for example, if you had $10,000 in emergency savings and you chose to go to Bank A, which pays a 0.5% interest rate, versus Bank B, which pays a 1% interest rate, the difference in interest paid over an entire year would be $50. You would earn on average about $50 of interest with Bank A and about $100 of interest with Bank B. This $50 difference, it's money, but it's really not worth the time and hassle of constantly watching the moving interest rates on high yield savings accounts and switching every time something changes. Third, make sure that the bank does not charge you any fees, either for opening or maintaining your high yield savings account, and that there are no minimum deposit or balance requirements. There's so much competition in the high yield savings account space. If you come across a bank that checks all the other boxes but has all types of limitations and costs on opening a savings account with them, walk away. There'll be another one just around the corner. Also, please be aware that the vast majority of high yield savings accounts have a maximum limitation of 6 transactions per month. A transaction is defined as either a withdrawal, deposit, or transfer between accounts. Go above these 6 transactions and the bank will charge you a fee, sometimes a hefty one. This is to encourage folks to treat their savings accounts like a savings account, not as a checking account where money moves around all the time. The fourth thing to look for when choosing which bank to go with is this. If you're someone like me that likes having all your savings in one place, go for a bank that allows you to easily add additional savings categories. So for example, you can have one savings account for an emergency fund, one savings account for a travel fund, and another savings account for a pet fund. If, on the other hand, you're someone that needs or prefers to have their emergency savings separate from everything else so that you can resist the temptation of dipping into it, then by all means, this fourth factor is not so important for you. Having said that, I always encourage our clients and students to simplify their finances as much as possible. Take a look at this video on money habits. These are the money habits that keep you poor, and you can learn a bit more about simplifying your finances. The fewer accounts and the fewer payment methods you have, the better you can track all your money and control all the financial leakages. The ability to have savings accounts for multiple categories is one of the reasons that most of our clients keep their emergency fund in high yield savings accounts with either Capital One, Marcus, or Ally Bank. I've included the links in the description below. These 3 banks don't have the highest interest rates, nor do they have the lowest though. They're somewhere in the middle. Remember what I said about not chasing interest rates. What these banks do have is that they tick all the boxes when it comes to convenience, reliability, flexibility, no fees, and no minimums, plus the ability to set up savings accounts for multiple categories. So here's an example from my Capital One account. The savings account you want is this 360 performance savings. And no joke, it literally takes 5 minutes or less to open. You can see that I have one set up here for my emergency fund and one set up for my travel fund. Okay, that's a bit of a measly emergency fund. I should probably transfer everything over from the travel fund to the emergency fund in this case. In any case, if I wanted to open a new savings account for a pet fund, I'd just double click on the emergency fund. There you go. Then I would go to Account, Services, and Settings, open a new account, and this screen pops up. And then from here, I can easily open a new savings account for my pet fund by clicking on the Apply Now button to the right of the Performance Savings. Ally has something similar, but they call them buckets, as you can see here. One of the reasons some of our clients like Ally is because in addition to these multiple savings buckets, they also have what they call surprise savings. With the surprise savings, what they do is if you link your checking account, which doesn't even have to be at Ally Bank, they will analyze your checking account activity, identify safe to save money, and automatically transfer it from your checking account to your Ally savings account. According to Ally, they will only make transfers in amounts under $100 and no more than 3 times per week. As I always say, having an emergency fund should be the first step in everyone's financial journey because it breaks the reliance on debt and it breaks the paycheck to paycheck cycle. Do you have an emergency fund? If not, now's the time to get started. Download our free financial guide below this video. It's chock full of emergency fund information and it includes our very popular budgeting template. With this template, you can start tracking your spending and figuring out how to begin allocating some money each week towards your emergency savings. So far, we've covered what type of account to put your emergency savings in, as well as how to go about choosing the right bank. Now, let's talk about the most common mistakes you should avoid when it comes to your emergency savings. The first one is thinking about your emergency fund as an investment. Do not invest your emergency fund in the market. I don't care if Uncle Joe has discovered the next Apple or Google or Aunt Jane heard of this fabulous investment called Bitcoin. Never, ever think about return on investment or inflation when it comes to your emergency savings. Your emergency fund is not an investment, and it should never be treated or thought of that way. Very often, people feel the temptation to invest their emergency savings, to put it into the stock market because they want to get a higher rate of return. The reality, though, is that you need this emergency money the most when you lose your job. And what goes hand in hand with job losses? Businesses losing money, a bad economy, and falling stock prices. So basically, when you need that money the most is also when the stock market is dropping like a rock in water and you're selling your investments at super low prices. I've been through 3 gut-wrenching recessions in 2 decades and watched many people forced to sell at the bottom of the market because that's where their emergency money was tied up. You don't want to be one of those people. And this is the reason why you don't put your emergency savings in the stock market. Think of it this way. Your emergency fund is, in plain and simple terms, protection money for when unexpected stuff comes up, such as a job loss, accident, or sudden home or car repair. So treat it like protection money, not investment money. And if you don't have an emergency fund or you want to give yours a bit of a boost, take a look at our emergency fund playlist right there. These videos will also walk you through how to calculate the emergency fund savings amount that is appropriate for you. The second mistake to avoid is keeping your emergency fund in your checking account. We've already gone through where to keep it, so let's talk briefly about where not to keep it. Your emergency savings should never, under any circumstances, be in your checking account because you'll be tempted to dip into this for regular bills and day-to-day expenses. And before you know it, your emergency fund will be either significantly smaller or non-existent. The third mistake to avoid is this one, not clearly defining for yourself what an emergency is. So what's an emergency? We've already talked about this, a job loss, when a car breaks down and you need to repair it, or you can't go to work the next day, or when there's a medical emergency or you get into an accident, when the roof suddenly starts leaking or the washing machine breaks down, and you have 4 kids and a week's worth of dirty laundry to wash. Those are emergencies. What's not an emergency? When that iPhone, that computer, that handbag that you've been eyeing for a while goes on a massive sale on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or Prime Day, or any one of those sale days. Or when your friends plan a surprise birthday dinner or a last-minute trip away, and you absolutely have to go with them. Those are not emergencies. Every one of these scenarios is very real and has happened. I cannot count anymore the number of times I've received questions from our clients and students asking whether a sudden unexpected sale, event, or trip should be considered an emergency. And my answer is always no. These are unplanned wants. They're unplanned luxuries, nice to haves. Have it very clear in your mind and for yourself. Know what an emergency really is. Define it, write it out on paper. Otherwise, you'll be dipping into your emergency fund unnecessarily for fake emergencies, and you'll have nothing left over eventually when those real emergencies hit. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate your support in helping to build out our personal finance community here. In the meantime, check out our other money saving, wealth building videos, and see you next Sunday.